Ghislaine Maxwell is trying to get sprung from prison by the Supreme Court. That's right. Welcome to Doug in Exile. This is where the happy patriots are. I looked up her pronunciation, and it's either Ghislaine or Ghislaine, not Ghislaine. Maxwell, Americans. I'm going to call her Ghislaine. I don't even know how to even pronounce her name, but I'm just saying I looked it up. It's like Ghislaine Maxwell. We're going to look into this, guys. Welcome to the Doug TenNapel channel. I'm Doug TenNapel. I'm the creator of Earthworm Jim. I've done 22 graphic novels. I've created award-winning video games. I was a showrunner on The VeggieTales. Got an Eisner Award, one of the highest awards in comics for one of my works on, I think it was Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors back in 2000. Okay, let's get to the news on Ghislaine Maxwell. I'm going to fight that name this whole darned show. Ghislaine, look at that, Ghislaine. It's Ghislaine or Ghislaine. Maxwell asked the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn her conviction. Maxwell's easy at least. Sentenced to 20 years for trafficking, says 2007 plea deal negotiated by Epstein should have protected her. So Ghislaine got a plea deal for ratting out Epstein, and supposedly his plea deal said that there would be no prosecution for his fellow co-conspirators. And then the court just threw her in prison and said, nope, no, it doesn't cover you. Okay. So, and I don't want her out of prison. And I don't believe she has any information that will help with the testimony of any names. I believe she's a liar, and she is a convicted trafficker of underage girls. She's the only person involved in this whole Epstein thing to face jail time. I don't want to spring her and let her free in the name of justice. Okay. Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted offender and associate of Jeffrey Epstein, has requested that the U.S. Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, Miss Kagan, Sotomayor, to overturn her conviction, saying she was unjustly prosecuted. And again, this is since 2007. It's been, her sentence is almost done. She's almost served her time. By my math, 2027, she goes free. In 2022, Maxwell was sentenced in Manhattan to 20 years in prison for trafficking and other related crimes. Her legal team, however, submitted a request to the Supreme Court on Monday, yesterday, seeking to overturn the lower court's decision, arguing that a prior plea deal that Epstein took protected Maxwell from prosecution. By the way, we have more Supreme Court news than just this, but this is the main one that kind of blew my mind, that this was swirling around the Supreme Court. And I don't believe they're going to take this case. Just between you and I don't believe the Supreme Court's going to take this, but they're trying. And I never know how they're actually going to decide. Who knows what they'll decide. Maxwell's submission to the Supreme Court comes days after she met Justice Department officials. By the way, if they do take the case, it's because they want to, this might be a long time thing that they've always wanted to settle that has nothing to do with Ghislaine Maxwell. They may have 50 other cases that are about people with plea deals that were scooped up and thrown in prison, and there's a long history of it. And so they want to settle that law, and that would be why they would take this case, not because Ghislaine Maxwell, this is all the sexy tabloid stuff that everyone's into. They're not going to take it on those grounds. As discussions began to see whether she would turn into a U.S. government cooperator, observers have suggested Maxwell may be able to expose new information about Epstein's trafficking, which I highly doubt, guys. She could have gotten a $2 million book deal to expose those names, and she didn't. So nothing. I'm telling you, there is nothing there. It doesn't make sense. And by the way, and Trump knows there's nothing there too. That's why he doesn't want a partner. They don't need the information. There's no information there. And the wealthy individuals who may have also been involved, it is not clear if, so for, she has, she didn't expose those wealthy individuals. You know what I mean? Look, this is my big moral claim against Miss Maxwell. If she had the name of 100 traffickers and she didn't expose them since 2007, she's an evil person. She is protecting them and hiding their names so that more offenses can happen over the last 20 years. Just to make it clear, if she hasn't exposed these 100 names yet, she personally is evil. Does that make sense? I don't believe she has the names, or there will be no new names exposed that have already been explained. Everyone has projected this stuff. It's all speculation. There's no truth or facts to it. And I'm telling you guys, Prepare to be disappointed. It is not clear if Maxwell will become a U.S. government cooperator and what she may receive in return. Yeah, I'll tell you what she's going to get. She ain't getting nothing. This ain't going to happen. Maxwell's Supreme Court filing argues that Epstein's 2007 plea deal with federal prosecutors in Florida should have barred her from prosecution, so she shouldn't have gone to jail. The controversial 2007 plea agreement between Epstein and the Justice Department said that if Epstein followed the terms of the plea agreement, the U.S. government would not charge, quote, any potential co-conspirators of Epstein, unquote, and that would include Miss Maxwell, including but not limited to 4 co-conspirators. Maxwell is not one of the 4 co-conspirators named in the agreement, but her attorneys say she did not need to be named to receive the protection from that deal. This is not going to the Supreme Court. Again, I don't know, guys. I don't know the future, and I'm way open to learning about this and bringing that news to you. Now, I have a few other takes on that Ghislaine Maxwell thing, but first, here's Time Magazine exclusive inside the preparations for Trump's next Supreme Court nominee. Who's it going to be? We're going for Beauvais. White House officials and a close circle of conservative lawyers are preparing for President Donald Trump to be able to hit the ground running if a Supreme Court vacancy opens up during the remaining 3.5 years of his second term, according to sources inside and outside the White House. Now, I know that Mike Davis, who we're huge fans of, has Trump's ear on this. The discussions are in early stages and focus on finding a nominee in the mold of Sam Alito, 75 years old, and Clarence Thomas, 77 years old, the 2 eldest justices, both of whom are considered stalwart conservative jurists who have taken narrow interpretations of the constitutional text. By narrow, they mean factual, actual interpretations of the constitutional text, while backing an expansive view of presidential power. Short lists of judges are circulating among Trump allies as they debate who would be best trusted to stick with the court's conservative wing during an appointment that could last decades. Who do you guys think is on that list? Let me know in the chat below if you guys have any names. I'd like to see Laura Ingraham up there. Quote, we are looking for people in the mold of Alito, Clarence Thomas. By the way, Laura Ingraham clerked for Clarence Thomas. Many of you may not know that about Laura Ingraham, but she is an outstanding legal mind. Clarence Thomas and the late Scalia, said a White House official familiar with the process, referring to Justice Antonin Scalia, who died in 2016. The official said it was premature to say the White House was getting ready for a vacancy. Republicans currently control the Senate, which must confirm any nominee to the court. And, it's always going to be Murkowski, and it's always going to be that Susan Collins trying to convince them, and remember the media made up that lie about Kavanaugh, and Murkowski just bought it hook, line, and sinker. The party also controlled the Senate throughout Trump's first term, allowing Trump to appoint 3 justices. This is his longest standing legacy, that Trump appointed Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, who were well regarded in conservative legal circles. Although, some shade's been cast on Amy Coney Barrett. She's been a pretty good hammer recently. Advisors close to Trump want to set the stage for the smoothest possible confirmation process and avoid the high drama of Kavanaugh's hearings in 2018 that focused on allegations of assault. Conservative lawyers around Trump are also feeling burned by a handful of recent decisions in which Amy Coney Barrett joined liberal members of the court and want to ensure the next nominee is someone who won't veer from the conservative bloc. So for starters, pick a man. There's a lot of anger at Amy Coney Barrett coming from the MAGA movement, says Benjamin Witz, editor of Lawfare and a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. I think you can imagine a very different type of nominee than we've had from Trump in the past. So remember, that first administration of Trump's in 2016 was full of corruption, full of Trump didn't understand how corrupt the state was. He was still trying to play by the rules and go along. He ain't doing that this time, guys. This time, get ready for Supreme Court Justice, Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Laura Ingraham. Emil Bove, he's our favorite, and he's also Mike Davis's favorite. Trump will make the final decision on who to put forward. By the way, Emil Bove, I believe, is too old. I want someone younger since they're lifetime appointments. Forward Senate confirmation says White House official, key players in the administration would be involved in vetting candidates. Vetting candidates would be Attorney General Pam Bondi, Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, White House counsel David Warrington, and Steve Kenney, the Deputy White House counsel for nominations. Mike Davis, that's our guy, named in this Time magazine article, guys. A conservative lawyer and bare-knuckle Trump defender is also expected to be influential voice in the process. What do you guys think of that, of Mike Davis? Do you trust Mike Davis? I trust Mike Davis. He's one of us, guys. A great legal mind, clerked for, I believe, for Gorsuch. Here's Mike Davis's quote: Justice Thomas and Justice Alito are irreplaceable, and I hope they do not retire anytime soon, Davis tells Time. Just in case, Davis says he has given the Trump White House a short list of bold and fearless nominees for the Supreme Court. And should there be a vacancy, he plans to play an outside supporting role to the White House efforts. Davis, who is founder of the Article 3 Project, a conservative judicial advocacy group, would not confirm which names are on the list. I have provided my recommendation list to the president, he said, and his team, and I am not going to discuss that list with anyone other than them, said Davis. He stressed that the president and the president alone will decide judicial nominees. Next article, this is another one on that. Maxwell, a little more detail on it. Ghislaine Maxwell pleads with the Supreme Court Trump to intervene in her criminal case. She can plead all she wants. That's her right. Ghislaine Maxwell, the longtime accomplice of Jeffrey Epstein, urged the Supreme Court on Monday to overturn her trafficking conviction as her attorney simultaneously made overtures to President Trump. By the way, she's not saying she's not guilty. She's saying that she should be covered by Jeffrey Epstein's immunity plea deal. She knows she's guilty, and we know she's guilty, and you know she's guilty. What do you think of people that are guilty of trafficking underage girls? Should they get off the hook? What do you think? Your opinion is what's important, really, the people's opinion. Quote, we are appealing not only to the Supreme Court, but to the president himself to recognize how profoundly unjust it is to scapegoat poor Ghislaine Maxwell for Epstein's crimes, especially when the government promised she would not be prosecuted, said David Oscar Marcus, said the same. And by the way, Epstein would not have gotten one of these girls without Ghislaine Maxwell. She was the go-between that went and gained the trust of a woman with these teenage call girls. Okay, now here's MSNBC. More on the Supreme Court. New birthright citizenship rulings provide the ultimate test for the Supreme Court. How the court handles the cases will be the strongest indicator yet of whether this court will check any administration action. So look, according to MSNBC, which I don't trust, they say look for how the Supreme Court handles birthright citizenship cases. This is from Ray Brescia, professor of law at Albany Law School. Just 1 month ago, the Supreme Court issued a relatively narrow but incredibly important ruling in a series of cases challenging President Donald Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship. The 6 conservative justices found that only in extremely limited circumstances can courts issue nationwide or universal injunctions, court orders that halt the application of law or policy throughout the country. Already, several plaintiffs have returned to different lower courts, and the judges hearing their cases determined that those plaintiffs have met the Supreme Court's new and extremely high bar to secure these injunctions once again. The Supreme Court is not playing along with the lower courts, trying to influence what the president can and can't do. That's good news for the Supreme Court. Pray that they hold their ground against birthright citizenship, which I think needs to be very narrowly defined so that it can't be abused and taken advantage of. Because the way that it's being used today by illegals is not what the founders intended. It's not what that initial law was, constitutional amendment was for. But we really need the Supreme Court to weigh in on this. And we want a good conservative Supreme Court to weigh in on this, to go back, because they're originalists, to go back to what the original intent was of that birthright citizenship statement was. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Doug in Exile. More Supreme Court news to come. Hope you subscribe.